first up, I'd like to say a thank you to Richard for setting up this panel beautifully with his comments about in-app advertising. We're going to talk about mobile right now. Welcome, guys. If I could ask you to just do a quick intro for me on where you work now and how you're involved in mobile advertising.
Yeah, so I'm Liam Brennan. I work at Mediacom on a team called Blink. I'm the Global Director of Innovation. What I do on that team is I help some of Mediacom's biggest clients work with tech companies and startups to help solve some of their biggest marketing challenges and exploit opportunities.
Cool, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here today. I've always wanted to use a Robbie Williams quote on a panel and just doesn't work at home in New York. My name is Matt Barish. I lead strategy, business development, and marketing, as well as programmatic at AdColony, formerly Opera Media Works, where we are the place that brands and marketers go to buy in-app advertising programmatically.
I'm Christina Konstantak. I'm Chief Revenue Officer of Rakuten Viber. Viber is the first messaging app. It came about 8 years ago. We still have an audience of about 1 billion people. And I was very, very, very impressed to hear how in-app is not safe, but Facebook is, irrespective of all the scandals that we had for the past 2 years. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I thought you'd all appreciate that one. So is it the year of the mobile?
So last year apparently was the year of mobile, which has been going for about 10 years now. So for those that aren't aware, that in the UK last year, not everywhere yet, but in the UK, brand spend on mobile exceeded desktop, which is the first time that's happened in history. And the main driver of that was video spend. So and video is sort of driving the revenue across desktop as well. And I think for me, that's an interesting opportunity to talk about branding in mobile because I'm taking off my innovation techie hat now and talking with my strategy planning hat. Brands that want to do brand building want to focus on interruptive storytelling placements, and they want to invest in video. So if you go across any media agency and where all the big money goes, it's on the clients that invest in television and audiovisual, i.e. pre-rolls on various sites, and money tends to follow eyeballs. So as people tend to watch more video on their phones, advertisers will sort of gravitate towards spending their money there. So on that side of things, in my mind, year of mobile as far as brand is concerned. However, given we're all talking about mobile on this panel, I've got too tight jeans on today, I can't get my phone out. We still see it as a bit of a screen, I think. There we go, demonstration. This is what a mobile looks like. We still see it as a screen, and I think it's more of a utility than a screen itself. And I think because often media buyers or indeed advertisers don't see it as more than just a big screen that's sort of on you all the time, we're missing out on a lot of opportunity that comes with some of the data that exists on mobile, the functionality of mobile, and indeed, and maybe this is a bigger topic to talk about later on, but sort of breaking down those brand performance silos. You can show a video to a consumer, but also you can drive them to a purchase fairly easily or drive them to a store, which is something that's very different from a TV spot or a pre-roll on your desktop or laptop on YouTube. So it's exciting times, and I think hopefully everyone in the room today, given we're all sort of more of a data and tech background, might be able to work with some of those brand teams to help change their opinion on what we can do on mobile.
And just a question as well to you, on are you seeing, you've been in this space for a long time now, how much has it changed over the last sort of 5 or 10 years in the way people perceive mobile versus how they're buying it now?
It's crazy, right? It's been the year of mobile probably for the past 10 years. And so I'm glad that you've proclaimed it official. That makes me feel better. Probably about 6 years ago, I went full-time into the mobile space. And at that point, I landed at AdColony because I sat down and I had a lunch with the head of sales at one of the major broadcast networks in the US who said, I want to be able to sell this thing the same way I sell primetime impressions on a 50-inch HD TV at an equal CPM. Yet the ad experiences were not equal. And so they were a line item. And that was a challenge for media companies. It was a challenge for mobile consumers. And what you found was that it was really sort of the precursor to OTT today, where if the app is the new TV channel, then users were really looking for today's prime time. And so what you've seen over the past 5 or 6 years is the evolution of technology. You've seen things like pre-caching technology increase user engagement, show better video metrics, and improve the consumer performance. And I think as a result, you found that companies with traditional media backgrounds that have struggled to find traction in mobile have been able to do so a little bit. They still trail in comparison to where the majority of us spend our time, right? That's in social. That's primarily the apps that we use most, which are utilities. That's messaging. And those apps have historically had a tough time gaining traction with brands. Brands don't know whether mobile apps are primarily vehicles for lower funnel, upper funnel. That remains to be seen. But I think we're starting to see a little more clarity today, and I think that's good for all of us.
And what are your comments, Christina, on the whole in-brand brand safety, in-app brand safety?
Oh, Facebook is safe. Apart from that, yeah, so I've been in VC of mobile for the past 7 years now. Started with mobile performance, actually. And it has to be said that app developers know how to do mobile, and they've known for a long time now. And they are very versed in what to track and how detailed the tracking can be. Of course, there are issues. There are always issues everywhere. But they've done a real effort. They made a real effort to improve how things were done in the app marketing space. However, it's also true that when we moved into programmatic and branding, it's like light years away. I don't know if it's because these brands are managed by agencies, or it's because they are traditional companies that are used to measuring things in a certain way on TV and web, and then when it comes to mobile and in-app, for them it's still very early days. But hopefully, if 2019 is the year of mobile, they will find out.
What do you guys see, Liam and Matt, what do you see as the main pushback from either agencies or brands themselves at the moment on wanting to buy advertising? Is it an education issue?
I'm going to let the agency guy go first.
The agency's been picked on now. I don't think there's a lot of pushback as such. It's more the opportunity just hasn't been there. I mean, the reality is a 2, 3, 4 by 60 banner doesn't build brands. Yeah. And if that is the majority...
You guys spend it. You
gotta
guys buy it.
Yeah, we do buy it, but we often buy it for more performance metrics, right? So the big guys, the P&Gs, Unilevers, Mars, Coca-Colas, only want to buy video. And until that is there, they won't purchase it. So there's always that slide at the end of that Mary Meeker presentation that comes out every year that shows attention versus media spend. It's quite misleading because just because someone's spending time with something doesn't necessarily mean it's a good opportunity to actually interrupt them and tell a brand message. And I use that term interrupt because that's very important when you're trying to build a brand, because people often don't want to hear about brands. They have to be interrupted and told about brands. And until there's interrupted video placements, often the money doesn't gravitate towards there. But when it comes to investment in mobile and actually where it sits, I think this is a general challenge with agencies and marketers alike, where because mobile seems to sit across a number of different silos and has changed position and changed in terms of opportunity, often it's hard to put it into a certain team. So if you go to for most agencies, you know, TV and video are bought by the same team because they're looking at reach planning across a number of channels. So mobile comes along and they go, great, that's a screen. But actually there's a lot of functionality there that could be used beyond that, where it's like second-party data exchange or use of driving to purchase, but then that doesn't necessarily fit with the TV buying team. That would be something that needs to be done upstream when it talks about user journey mapping and strategy. So there's a real challenge around education, but also the space is evolving so fast, it's very difficult to restructure an agency or indeed re-educate your client in such a short amount of time to take full advantage of what's out there.
Do you agree with that assessment?
I think there's some valid points. I think that the biggest challenge for an agency is simply time and mind share, right? It's the fact that education is definitely lacking, but in the mobile space, to Christina's point, app developers are so far ahead of traditional media companies that there are probably, hundreds of thousands of apps that live within the App Store, but getting the attention of the media buyer for the brand equity that the app offers, as well as the audience that they deliver, that's incredibly challenging and taxing if you're a mobile-specific publisher or app developer. And so there are so many great apps out there. I'll use gaming as a perfect example. But how many of you in the audience can name more than 3 gaming developers? Probably not a lot of you, but the majority of you have games on your phone. You're playing games. That's the majority of your time is spent outside of, let's say, Facebook or an Amazon app. So I think that, again, it's really sort of, if you look at the evolution of programmatic and media buying, historically it's been on a one-to-one basis. You bought a PMP, when programmatic started to emerge, and you bought that PMP on a publisher specifically in desktop. In mobile, it's a little bit different. Programmatic's a little bit late to the game, and odds are you're probably not buying that PMP for the brand equity of the publisher specifically. You're buying across a vast audience, which gives you reach across many different app publishers, which is an aggregation, and a lot tougher to decipher where you're seeing success in a time when historically there's been a lot of murkiness, and I think now you're seeing far more transparency and accountability.
And that's an interesting point you're making as well about, same question to you guys as the earlier audio panel. Is there real opportunity now, more opportunity in mobile because of the whole cookieless world, and you're in a space where if it's in-app, typically it's logged in, you have the person's data, you have a lot more data than you would if it's a mobile web experience. Do you think there's more opportunity now in mobile to push people down that path because the audience is there and you've got potentially better measurement in the long term, or do you think that's still an evolving space?
I think there is a real opportunity, but to Liam's point, I think that the banner doesn't cut it. So the problem comes from the fact that if you're just doing mobile to put banners in front of the consumers, it's never going to work, irrespective of where they are, in web, in app, in wherever they are. So we actually work with a lot of these brands that you said one video, and we don't sell one video. But what we do is that we try to educate them on what the opportunities in the messaging space are, and we develop customized projects for them. So we come down to the fact that one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work. Programmatic, this is what it does today, ultimately. Yeah, okay, you can target your audience, and you can target everybody that likes Pink Umbrella and whatever in a PMP, but it's through banners or videos in the best case scenario. So there is an opportunity, but it has to go beyond the banner.
Do you think, and to your earlier point as well, Liam, about, again, is this, similar to audio where it's actually moving more to a brand buying space and much less about performance, unless you're driving to e-commerce sale or a footfall, is it really swinging back to more of a brand sell?
I think the growth is brand, and certainly when it comes to audio as well, that's the case too. So it's a way of reaching an audience with a different type of message, or potentially in a different moment. So when it comes, the audio space is really interesting from a mobile perspective, because traditionally audio conjures up radio, which is in the car, or it's maybe in the background of your workplace, whereas when it comes to the personal audio experience, it's one-to-one, targeted, and potentially on at more times of day. So the conversation is just being flipped when people start to see the opportunity around where can I reach people, how many people can I reach, and with what format that allows me to tell a story. So that's the brand conversation. But the performance one, I think it's still a strong one for mobile, because the measurement isn't perfect, but it's arguably better than a lot of other media channels. And there is increasingly that capability to have more of a one-to-one conversation. Talking back to the in-app opportunity, for a long time when we looked at branding, we're often talking about large, broad reach. But often when it comes to the app, we're actually getting much better context. And when we're talking about moving to a cookieless world, and like it or not, I think contextual buying is going to make a big comeback in the next 12 months to 2 years. When it comes to in-app placements, I think the mobile space actually has a good chance to win a lot of budget, whereas digital sort of desktop buying might not.
So what do you think to the earlier point that Dom was saying from Immediate Media, that there's, the average person has, 10 apps on their phone that they use on a regular basis, everything else you download once and then never look at it again. How difficult is it to make an impression in that space? Because it is a crowded marketplace from an app perspective. And how do you decide where to spend the money?
Well, I think, one of the biggest things that I'm seeing clients do at the moment is try and gravitate people into their own branded ecosystems. So, because I think they realize that the ability to buy across lots of fragmented applications is complicated, and actually the measurement becomes more difficult the more you move away from, I hate saying this as an agency person, but the more Google and Facebook and these companies have big pluses in that you can reach a lot of people within their ecosystem and you get good tracking within their ecosystem. When you start to fragment that across lots of different apps, you get real issues with reach measurement, tracking measurement, etc. So even though brands still want to advertise in these big players and the small players, they are starting to realize that actually the opportunity with mobile might come from either a long-term partnership with a third-party app that is in their kind of space, whether that be retail or services, or it's about building up their own app. Starbucks is probably the strongest one I've seen, which is, if you're a Starbucks customer, get the app, get them in the app, know when they use when they go get their Starbucks and what they buy, and start to have a one-to-one conversation with the consumer, then use your media around that to remind people that Starbucks is great coffee and just kind of keep the brand top of mind. And it becomes less about banging out pre-rolls on YouTube and banner ads, but rather just keeping the brand present and then reminding people to open up the Starbucks app, collect their data, find out more about the customer, and engage them that way.
I mean, that works specifically very well in the Starbucks example, right? Because it's also location-based, so they can retarget you and they know you're down the road from your favourite shop and all that kind of stuff. What are some of the more interesting examples you've seen, Matt, in the mobile space recently, like the different types of kind of innovative advertising that you're seeing?
I think first off, I think the ad network is back, right? I think for all the conversations today around privacy and data and whatnot, the app space can somewhat circumnavigate that and be a safe harbor. Secondly, I think that's all going to be transacted programmatically, right? So welcome to the era of the programmatic ad network. And I think that's going to be a thing moving forward. Examples are interesting. AdColony was born in the video space. We invented a product called Instant Play, which was pre-cached HD video, which renders in a tenth of a second. We saw engagement rates go through the roof. Incentivized video, as it was known, was really a performance vehicle. Today, we're seeing it sort of shift to rewarded video and be a form of value exchange. And I think you're starting to see more publishers adopt value exchange in lieu of failed paywall attempts. So I think that's where there's innovation coming on the publishing side. But on the marketer side, with video, you've got sight, sound, and motion, but you can also take the capabilities that live within the phone and use them to your advantage. So really smart marketers are taking things like haptic or the gyroscope and using that to their advantage to create interactive, immersive ad experiences that they can't in any other medium. And that's a little shake, rattle, and roll, right? And that's really changing the game in a big way really quickly. We didn't see that a year or two ago, but now we're seeing brands start to come to us, start to partner with us, want to understand and really get a deeper knowledge of, what are those capabilities and how do we transact on those fairly efficiently, fairly effectively across the entire mobile ecosystem.
And how do you think it's going to dovetail as well with some, I think Dom from Captify was talking a bit earlier about voice activation, so voice search both in the home and on mobile devices. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I use search on a PC at all anymore. It's always on your phone or on an iPad, right? So how do you think those two ecosystems will potentially merge or influence each other going forward?
I think it's interesting to talk about voice in the context of mobile because it comes back to that wider point of utility versus brand space. And I think for a lot of brands, there's probably not a huge opportunity in placing your brand in a voice search, but rather being present when someone makes one. And I think the voice opportunity really is mobile. I mean, the speakers are growing, but the mobile is on you all the time, and it's a much more functional usage out and about and much easier than typing. I think it comes.
You are mobile in your house if you're walking around.
It's everywhere. You move it. I'm quite sedentary, but it comes back to understanding how consumers use the device as and when, and putting your brand in front of them when they're in the market to use your product. And so when it comes to voice, if people are looking for something or either looking for that particular type of product or they're looking for a thing that your product can help with, you need to make sure that your messaging is front and center on the Google search that people make on voice, or that your website is optimized such that it appears further up the rankings. So again, when we start talking about mobile, it starts to spin off into lots of different directions around video and voice because it is, I guess, a small computer on you all the time, and it becomes more of a conversation around utility than it is necessarily just a screen.
So I think that on voice, while there is a real opportunity, it's still very early days. And looking at Google and the fact that the Google Assist is available only on hardware for now, and they're just looking into implementing that into software, we're not there yet. But there are other ways of using mobile effectively, especially in app when it comes to utility. If you're looking at what's in between, or rather what's before voice, which should be the chatbots, which are, they were fashionable a while back, but they are highly unutilized because while it's very interesting for the management to see that you have a chatbot, very few brands actually know how to use it because it forces you to basically be open 24 hours a day and to be able to start engaging in a conversation with the consumer. And that's something that a lot of brands are not capable to do today. So this is typically one of the things that we're seeing happening on mobile. Funnily enough, in other markets, apart from tier 1 markets, where the brands are forced to be a lot more innovative when it comes to mobile than in the established markets where they have other channels, where now they use chatbots in a much more sophisticated way, integrating them into the messaging experience, of course, because it's the right environment for that. Actually, the things that they can do, from all your banking services to entering all sorts of Coca-Cola competitions, can be done in a very native experience through chatbots.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of other opportunities there. And then when we talked earlier about the connected cars thing as well, like how does that interact with mobile? If people are going into stores and you're forcing footfall, all of that kind of stuff. So it does come back to that functional element, doesn't it? So coming back to my earlier question to you as well, what do you think the biggest challenges are around changing that perception of, there's clearly people still in the market that think in-app advertising is not brand safe or not measurable or open to fraud?
It's education, really. So you have to look at the different type of. I understand that there are lots of apps out there, and I understand that you can't control everything. But that's the same for web. There are lots of websites out there, so you don't know what's on each and every one of them. So again, it's a matter of looking at the ecosystem, identifying at least types of publishers where you know that you have to be present because they offer a real opportunity. Whitelisting is one way of doing it. But ultimately, even if you're looking at what they are doing and what they are bringing to the table and trying to understand their business model and going beyond just putting a banner in front of the consumer, or if you're going to do that, fine, that's one way of doing it. It's just that it's a shame to just be doing that.
Yeah.
So education, and we do it in parallel with both brands and agencies, and the fact that ultimately the consumers are spending most of their time on mobiles, and more importantly, when it comes specifically to messaging, we know that everybody's spending more time on messaging, whatever app we're talking about, rather than anything else, and that includes social media, actually.
What about, sorry, go, Matt.
So I think a lot of the challenge has been accountability, right? And so when you look at things like viewability, which entered the vernacular probably 3 or 4 years ago, there really weren't good solutions to measure accountability in app until just recently. So, most of the technology that's been developed historically for the programmatic channel was built with a desktop first, browser first purpose in mind. And so what you're seeing is you're just starting to see companies develop in-app capabilities and technologies that will help both the buy side and the sell side validate the ability to transact in mobile. I think that comes in terms of whether it be viewability, whether it be siphoning out IVT and fraud. There are just far better solutions today than there were a year and a half ago, and that just validates the case to go out and invest in app. Didn't exist. Now it's here.
And in terms of any other sort of tech challenges you can think of that might be stopping people from doubling down on mobile?
I think you mentioned there about it sort of being seen as a desktop experience. I think generally the challenge with any new technology is that people always use their previous frame of reference for what they should be doing with it. So even when you look back to the first TV ads, well worth a YouTube look for this, but the first TV ads were often just a static image with the radio track underneath it, because people were used to doing radio advertising and therefore tried to move radio advertising to TV. And it's the same thing with mobile, and it's the same thing with voice and lots of other spaces where consumers have time with whether it's a screen or not a screen, is that people say, can I stick a TV ad on this? And if they can't, they sort of scratch their heads and go, well, let's go deal with this later because it's too complicated. And that's sub agencies, of course, as well as brands. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. How do you decide on what's right to use? Because people want to use the easiest thing. They want to use the thing that reaches the mass audience. So I think when it comes to mobile now, the penetration's over 100% in most markets, which is weird, but everyone has a mobile. You look at China, for example, arguably the most developed mobile market in the world. They are often not having traditional media placements within their mobile advertising. It's an ecosystem environment. The work that's being done there is often sponsorships within the apps, or it's brands building up their own first party or partnerships with the likes of Tencent, for example, or they're entering into conversations around data exchanges with those suppliers. So we need to look at China and more generally Asia as well. I've just been to Myanmar a few weeks ago on a holiday, and they're growing in exactly the same fashion. Is that people just need to understand it's a device on someone all the time. It's an always-on communication device. What is the best and most organic way to communicate with consumers where I can tell a brand story and drive them to some sort of outcome? And that often isn't a video. That's often something else. But that requires someone to be educated at the agency and the brand side.
I was going to say, isn't it so similar to the conversation we had with the audio guys earlier? Is this not an opportunity for premium publishers to help solve some of those problems? Because actually they have a very good understanding about how people are interacting with certain types of content in a publisher environment, and could maybe come up with some more innovative ways to say, actually, let's experiment with this type of ad, because we know this is what that person's doing within the app, and they've got all the information about it, as well as the functional applications.
Yes, this is what. Sorry.
The primary question is, what's a premium publisher in app? And I don't know that anyone's been able to define that to date.
Yeah, but as a publisher, that's exactly what is happening. So we do try to educate, but to Liam's point, mobile sits across very different teams, especially when you go beyond programmatic. Mm-hmm. And it's not only on the agency side, but especially on the brand side, where typically, if you want to educate somebody on the messaging space, you're going to be talking to about 20 departments, because it's everything from branding, media, CRM, performance, sales, and some other people in procurement and legal.
Yeah.
So it is happening, but it's taking time.
So that whole omni-channel buying approach is sometimes also hindering, because to your point, you have to talk to it like the conversation you had where you go in and say, I just want to sell the same thing on this device as on everything else. And you're like, well, it doesn't really work like that.
I think a lot of this always comes. It's nice not to be able to blame the creative agency as a media agency for once. Actually, a lot of this stems back to the planners at the agency that don't understand what the opportunity is. Part of my job and my team's job is to actually explain what the opportunity is to people that sit upstream. So it's the people that have those first opportunities to talk to a brand manager at a brand and say, right, okay, this is what you need to do. These are the sorts of media channels that can help you drive to your outcome better and map out that user journey, and then let the people that do the buying decide on what are the partners they should be working with. Often, and this has been my experience across every agency I've ever worked at, is often that decision to choose the channel comes far too down the chain. And that works when you're buying video, that works when you're buying banner ads. It doesn't necessarily work when you're mapping out end-to-end user journeys. When you're talking about utility, you actually have to think about, what is the consumer doing with my device? When are they using it? How are they using it? And once you crack that code, you can tell clients, yes, you should be using this, or indeed, no, you should not be using this, and avoid like the plague, which is not for mobile, but some other things that begin with V and the same with CE might be one of those things. But yeah, and I think it is a complete reset, and back to, I feel like I've bashed agencies a little bit. When you look at brands that are doing it in-house, like a lot of the D2C brands at the moment, they're probably even worse, because they just see it as a pure play data and performance opportunity. And actually, I think you've got two ends of the conversation going on now. You've got some brands that are really embracing mobile as a place to reach people with video and audio at times when they can't reach them through other screens, versus people who are just using it as a pure play performance channel because it's cheap media and you can get a high click rate and you can drive them to drive an app download. There's something in the middle there, and I think that bit in the middle isn't going to be fixed until we have a more upstream conversation about mobile.
Actually, I've only got time for one more question. I was going to ask data. Are there unique data targeting opportunities in mobile that you don't get in other media channels?
Yes, but it depends from one publisher to another. So
Yeah.
It's a very broad answer. And it comes down to what your app is doing and what your audience is looking for, and what's the service that you are providing at the end of the day. So definitely.
Yeah, I mean, for AdColony specifically, we aggregate a portfolio of tens of thousands of apps with our SDK, and so data for us is really a fairly simple exercise where we actually believe the responsibility for data is on you, and it's a buy-side function, and so we want to make it as easy and turnkey for the buy side to transact. We want to be the place where they come for media.
I think the data conversation is more about understanding what consumers are doing and how they're acting on their mobile. So not talking about how do we reach a certain segment, but actually reaching a behavior. And I think that again that's a big shift in how planning is done at agencies and buying is done.
Especially when anyone's been talking about for the last 5 years is audience targeting.
Yep.
So
And
yeah.
mobile.
Don't talk about segments when you
And
talk about
mobile.
branding. You'll get a bad reaction from brands.
We're back to context and networks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, guys, we're out of time. Thank you so much. This has been great.